Tonight, you will walk into a chamber of silk and silence. A mother's arms once held a newborn princess here, warm, breathing, innocent. But before sunrise, that same child would be laid beneath jade tiles, her tiny body turned into a secret that could crown an empress. No one heard the last heartbeat. Or perhaps too many did. If a mother kills her own child, is she still a mother, or has power taken her soul? Follow me into the forbidden palace of the Tang Dynasty, where love was a weakness, and even heaven dared not watch. Listen closely. History often remembers Wu Zetian as the Dragon Empress, ruthless, unstoppable, chosen by fate. But before the crown, before the accusations, before the night a child stopped breathing beneath a silk veil, she was simply Wu Zhou, a young girl trapped inside a palace of lions. She entered the Imperial court under Emperor Taizong, not as a princess, not even as a consort of rank, but as a kairen, a low concubine barely worth a whisper. She was 16, blooming with intelligence sharper than the polished blades the generals carried. Her beauty drew eyes. Her mind drew fear. The palace air smelled of sandalwood and suspicion. Every woman here dreamt the same dream, to be seen by the Son of Heaven, to rise, to survive. But Wu Zhao learned fast. Admiration was a cage lined with knives. She once tended horses in the stables, her fingertips brushing the fine hair of imperial steeds. They too were trapped, strong, fast, but never free. She watched and she understood. In this empire, power did not belong to the bold, only to the patient. Each morning she walked through corridors where masks smiled and eyes hunted. Ministers whispered that she read too many books. Matron eunuchs warned concubines not to think. Thinking women were dangerous. She smiled anyway. Her voice, when she spoke, flowed like warm honey, soft enough to be dismissed, sweet enough to be heard. Taizong found himself drawn to that voice on lonely nights, when warfare stained his dreams and old bones ached beneath royal silks. He taught her politics. She taught him comfort. But the emperor was aging, his heart colder than the jade ornaments in his hair. She could never climb higher beside a man whose fire was dying. Not when others circled the throne waiting for it to fall. One of those men was Li Ji, the shy prince who hated battle and loved poetry. He did not have his father's iron warcraft, but he had something far more dangerous, Wu Zhao's attention. Every glance they exchanged was a locked door and an unspoken promise. In the quiet corners of the palace library, her fingers traced the edges of scrolls, and sometimes his. She whispered verses. He blushed like a boy. She did not love him, not yet. But she saw in him a future, an emperor young enough to adore her, weak enough to need her. When Emperor Taizong died, Wu Zhao should have been sent to a convent, shaven-headed, forgotten, buried inside prayers. That was the fate of unwanted concubines. But Li Ji, now Emperor Gaozong, dreamed of her still. He summoned the girl from the ashes of his father's reign back into the forbidden palace, not as a ghost, but as a rising star. Empress Wang, the lawful wife, greeted Wu Zhao with the smile of a woman whose heart was cracking beneath jewels. She feared Wu Zhao's return. She feared her beauty. She feared what power looked like when wrapped in silk and ambition. Still, Wu Zhao bowed deeply, her forehead nearly touching the cold marble. Humility, her finest disguise. Days passed. Nights passed slower. And soon Wu Zhao carried something within her, a heartbeat that could change the empire. When she told Emperor Gaozong she was pregnant, his joy spilled like wine from a shaking cup. A child of his love, his longing, his victory over his father's ghost. The palace trembled. The empress panicked. A prince or princess birthed by Wu Zhao would legitimize her place and threaten all others. Wu Zhao's hand rested against the gentle curve beneath her robes. For the first time, it was not only ambition she protected, but life. She whispered to the unborn, "You will not know fear. You will not cry for scraps of love. You will be wanted, at least." She wanted to believe that, because the truth was colder. This child was both her hope and her shield. As her belly grew, so did the secrecy around her. Spies counted her breaths. The Empress counted her days. In the 9th month, under a night where stars hid behind storm clouds, a baby girl was born, tiny, pink, her cry thin yet determined. A daughter. The Emperor held her like a fragile treasure. Wu Zhao watched him glow with pride and quietly drowned in dread. Daughters were not heirs. Daughters gained no power. Daughters stole the favor that should have been given to a future son. A daughter could be loved, but a daughter could not save her mother. Wu Zhao stared into the newborn's dark eyes, so innocent, so unaware that she had been born into a war disguised as a nursery. She kissed the baby's forehead and tasted her own fear. Outside the chamber, Empress Wang waited, smiling through clenched teeth. The scent of jealousy was stronger than the blooming peonies. Her presence was a dagger with silken ribbons. Wu Zhao felt the walls closing in. In this palace, mothers were not allowed to be mothers. They were merely pieces on a board, forced to choose between love and survival. She looked again at the sleeping infant, her child. Her threat, a storm was coming, one that might cost them both everything, and somewhere inside the deepest corner of her heart, the seed of a terrible question took root. What if the only way to protect her future was to end her past? The baby slept beneath a canopy of emerald silk, embroidered with dragons she would never command, guarded by servants who feared to breathe too near her royal skin. Her name was not yet spoken loudly. Newborn princesses were fragile promises, and promises could die overnight. Still, Wu Zhao watched the child's chest rise and fall, each breath a reminder that heaven had granted her another chance to climb. The nursery smelled of chrysanthemum oil and polished jade. Lanterns flickered behind pearl curtains, casting rippling shadows like ghosts dancing along the walls. Nurses bowed and tiptoed. Eunuchs hovered with scrolls of rules thicker than their wrists. How to wrap the child, how to rock the child, how to protect the child from the politics that slept under her pillow. But nothing could shield her from the eyes that watched. Empress Wang visited often. Her perfume announced her before her footsteps did. She would lift the infant gently, smile sweetly, and leave the room with fingers digging into her sleeves. Wu Zhao's heart tightened each time. The Empress's visits were not affection. They were inspection. She counted every gesture Wu Zhao made, searching for weaknesses, calculating which moment to strike. Sometimes, Empress Wang would lean close to the crib and whisper so softly that even the walls strained to hear. A girl, how unfortunate. A pity she was not born from the Empress. Wu Zhao kept her face calm while her palms bled inside her own clenched sleeves. She knew this game. She understood each blade hidden beneath every innocent word. The Emperor, blinded by paternal joy, invited Empress Wang to bond with the child. He thought compassion would heal the rival hearts, but compassion, in the Forbidden Palace, was merely a sharper form of cruelty. At night, Wu Zhao wrapped herself around her daughter like silk armor, feeling the warmth, the heartbeat. She whispered lullabies tangled with desperate promises. "You will live. You will grow. You will return my years of suffering," the child cooed, unaware that she had already become the center of a storm. Rumors spread like wildfire among the concubines. Wu Zhao hopes this girl becomes the next emperor. Wu Zhao will place her child above the Empress's authority. Wu Zhao has spellbound his majesty, and each rumor fed the Empress's rage. One evening, thunder cracked across the sky. Rain lashed against crimson window frames. Wu Zhao cradled the child as the storm rattled the palace bones. A nurse whispered news. The Empress has visited the Emperor this night. She complains the child has too much attention. She suggests that the Emperor should focus on the state. Wu Zhao felt something cold crawl up her spine. She remembered Taizong's warnings about the palace. Affection is a debt paid in blood. If the Empress truly convinced Gaozong to distance himself, Wu Zhao's position would crumble like wet clay. The baby stirred, fussing. Wu Zhao kissed her forehead. She tried to imagine a future where her daughter grew into silk robes and imperial titles. A young princess running through magnolia gardens, laughing under the protection of the dragon throne. But the fantasy dissolved quickly. Reality tasted bitter, like incense smoke trapped in a sealed room. The emperor's visits grew shorter. The empress's smiles grew wider. Ministers whispered in corners again. The child was becoming a target. Wu Zhao stood by the cradle one night, fingers grazing the jade railing, feeling the chill of stone seep into her bones. She counted the shadows in the room and realized none of them were hers. Every servant here owed loyalty to the empress. Every mouth could speak a lie that would become a death sentence. If the baby cried too loudly and the empress would say Wu Zhao neglected her. If the baby laughed at the empress, she would claim Wu Zhao taught the child. Mockery. If the baby simply existed, she was a threat. Wu Zhao's heart twisted. Was she raising a daughter, or nurturing a weapon destined to be used against her? That night, Empress Wang visited again. Her robe shimmered like a lake of sharpened ice. She leaned over the sleeping infant, fingers brushing a soft cheek. "She is peaceful," Wang murmured. Such a shame that peace never lasts long for girls like her. Wu Zhao met the Empress's gaze. No smiles now, only truth, cold and fatal. When Wang left, the door closed with a click that sounded too much like a tomb sealing shut. Wu Zhao held her daughter tightly. The infant gurgled, unaware of the terror cradling her. Outside, the storm quieted. But inside Wu Zhao, a darker storm raged, one that lightning dare not strike. She looked down at the tiny fingers curled around her thumb. So small, so trusting. A thought crept into her mind like a snake sliding beneath silk. If she remains alive, they will destroy us both. Her breath trembled. Tears gathered, but she did not let them fall. Love was a luxury she could no longer afford. The baby's eyes fluttered open, glossy and pure, reflecting the lantern light like tiny moons. Wu Zhao whispered, "Forgive me, for I will always choose power, because power is the only way I can protect you." The baby smiled, as though heaven itself had blessed this fragile moment. But heaven had long ago abandoned this palace. As the night deepened, Wu Zhao realized something horrific. She was losing not only control, but time. Soon, a choice would have to be made, and once made, there would be no way back. It began with a silence too heavy for night. Lanterns had been dimmed early, a strange order from the Empress's guards. Nurses were dismissed, eunuchs stationed farther away than usual. The corridors outside the nursery felt like a throat being slowly closed by two invisible hands. Wu Zhao sensed it before she saw anything. She had learned that survival meant listening not to voices, but to the absence of them. The baby stirred in her sleep, little fists curling like petals trying to bloom in the dark. Wu Zhao pressed her lips to the child's soft scalp, breathing in the scent of lotus powder and milk. She wanted to freeze this warmth forever, but warmth was a fragile thing in a palace made of stone. A single drop of rain tapped the window. Then another. Then a relentless downpour, as if the sky knew what was about to happen and tried to drown the act before it occurred. Thunder rolled low, like drums summoning ghosts. A candle flickered, casting Wu Zhao's shadow across the wall in the shape of a dragon hunched over a star. She heard soft footsteps approaching, measured, predatory. The door slid open without a knock. Empress Wang stood there, hair pinned with phoenix gold, eyes as glossy and sharp as lacquered knives. Behind her, Consort Xiao, another rival, watched with the gleeful anticipation of a vulture waiting for death. Wang stepped into the nursery with a silence that screamed power. "She sleeps," Wang whispered. "As all useless things do." Wu Zhao's jaw tightened. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, faster than the storm outside. "A mother should be grateful," Wang continued, To have even a moment of peace before her child becomes a burden. Wu Zhao understood the message. We can take her from you any time, and no one will hear your scream. The Empress extended a finger, touching the baby's cheek with delicate cruelty. The infant grimaced and let out a soft cry. Wang smirked. Wu Zhao's arms wrapped around her daughter protectively, too protectively, the Empress noticed. A girl like her, Wang said casually, can be replaced. Sons are what heaven favors. A girl born from a concubine? A gentle shrug. She is already half forgotten. Consort Xiao giggled behind her palm. The sound was small, yet razor-sharp. Wang stepped so close that Wu Zhao felt her breath, sweet and venomous. Do not cling too tightly, Wu Zhao, she whispered. In this palace, when you love something, that is when it dies. Then she turned and walked out into the rainstorm's echo. The door slid shut. The lock clicked, and the nursery plunged back into suffocating silence. The baby whimpered, as if sensing the danger wrapped around her tiny life. Wu Zhao rocked her gently, fingers trembling despite her steel resolve. Lightning flashed. For a moment the room looked like a battlefield, mothers and monsters sharing the same body. Wu Zhao whispered, voice cracking under the weight of the impossible. If they take you, I lose everything. Her tears finally fell, hot and desperate. They splashed onto the baby's silk blanket, forming tiny dark spots like blood on snow. She kissed her daughter's forehead again and again. As though each kiss was a goodbye, she couldn't speak aloud. The baby opened her eyes, wide, pure, trusting, unaware. A little coo escaped her lips, reaching into Wu Zhao's chest and tearing her heart open. Thunder cracked so close that the walls vibrated. Wu Zhao closed her eyes. This world was never meant for you, she whispered. And heaven did not come to save us. Her hands, the same hands that once stroked scrolls, tended horses, caressed a lover, now trembled with a darker purpose. Very slowly, as if moving through water, she drew the silk blanket up over the baby's face. The child fussed. A soft questioning sound. Wu Zhao's breath shattered into fragments. I am sorry, she choked. So sorry. Her hands pressed down. The baby struggled, tiny limbs pushing against fate. Outside, rain hammered like fists on a sealed tomb. Wind screamed through the eaves, 1,000 spirits protesting the crime being woven. Wu Zhao forced herself not to look. She could not bear the sight of innocence. Twisting into silence, her heart beat so violently, she thought it might burst through her ribs and bleed out her guilt. Seconds became centuries. Then the struggle stopped. The blanket settled. Stillness took its place where life had been only moments ago. Wu Zhao dropped to her knees beside the cradle, her body shaking uncontrollably. She pressed her forehead against the cold jade until it felt like ice devouring her skull. She listened, prayed to hear another breath, begged for heaven to undo what she had done, but the only sound was the storm weeping outside. She pulled the blanket down to see the little face one last time. So peaceful. Too peaceful. A sob ripped from her throat like fabric tearing. She clutched her daughter to her chest, no longer as a shield for power, but as a mother broken by the very act meant to save her. Footsteps rushed toward the door. Wu Zhao froze. Not like this. She would not let them turn her grief into weakness. She laid the child back in the cradle, carefully arranging the blanket as though sleep had simply arrived early. Then she sat beside the body and stared into the darkness with a calmness carved from pure madness. The door burst open. The Emperor rushed in, Empress Wang behind him, already ready to perform convincing sorrow. What happened? He gasped. Wu Zhao said nothing. She lifted her eyes, tears shimmering like broken pearls, and pointed at Wang. Her voice finally returned, silent yet thunderous. She killed my daughter. The nursery that once glowed with soft lantern light had become a tomb wearing silk. Servants flooded in, trembling. Eunuchs fell to their knees as if the ground had turned to fire. The emperor staggered toward the cradle, his hands shaking like banners in a storm. Gaozong's face collapsed when he saw the stillness, his daughter's lips no longer searching for breath, her body far too quiet for a soul so new. He looked at Wu Zhao, hoping for a denial, a miracle, a lie to crush the truth. But Wu only wept, and her silence told him everything he needed to believe. She didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She held her sorrow gently like a blade concealed beneath velvet. The emperor fell beside the cradle, fingers trembling against the jade railing. "My child, my little star." His voice splintered, but Wu Zhao, she turned sorrow into theater. Her knees hit the marble floor with a sharp crack. Her weeping escalated into a haunting melody echoing through every cold corridor. "Why?" she cried. "Why take an innocent heart? A child who knew nothing of ambition or war." Her words struck like arrows, aimed not at heaven, but at the woman standing just behind the emperor. Empress Wang froze, caught in a tragedy she did not script. Wu Zhao crawled forward, grabbing the hem of the emperor's robe, her tears soaking into gold-threaded dragons. "My lord," she sobbed, "only one person had reason to harm her. The one who fears my love threatens her crown." Heads turned toward Wang. Shock rippled, followed by suspicion, followed by fear. Wang opened her mouth to protest. Too late. Wu Zhao's grief had already spoken. Her sorrow had already judged. The emperor's gaze twisted, confusion drowning his reason. Wang stepped back, words choking in her throat. "I would never..." But even denial sounded like guilt in a room full of death. Consort Xiao, who had arrived earlier and watched from behind Wang, added a trembling whisper. "We all know. The Empress despises the Lady Wu." A tiny spark, and the kindling of palace fear ignited. Wu Zhao covered her face, sobbing so violently her hair came undone, falling around her like a mourning veil. Every tear slid down her cheeks like drops of accusation. The emperor's pain mutated into wrath. He shouted for the head eunuch. Servants dashed into motion like leaves whipped by furious wind. The order echoed. "Investigate every hand that touched the princess." Wang's breath hitched. She realized this was not investigation. It was judgment in disguise. Her knees trembled, but before she could speak, Wu Zhao collapsed again, wailing louder. "She visited my child tonight. She said peace never lasts for girls like her." Wang's face blanched. Those very words and her own careless cruelty returned like a curse. The emperor trembled with rage. He could not bear the thought that the woman sworn to protect. His heirs had become the predator. The storm outside roared as if heaven were being forced to witness injustice yet again. Wu Zhao rose slowly. Grief hardened into porcelain. Composure. She took Gaozong's hands in. Hers. "If you do nothing, my lord," she whispered, "then even heaven will call you the father who failed to protect his own blood." The emperor's eyes filled with fire. He could not protect his father. He could not protect his brothers. This daughter he would avenge. Guards swarmed Empress Wang and Consort Xiao, dragging them away from the emperor's sight. Wang screamed, voice cracking into desperate fragments. "She lies!" "It wasn't me. She killed her own child. Everyone knows she would." Her accusations were drowned by armored footsteps and Wu Zhao's quiet sobs. The heavy doors slammed shut. Wang's voice faded into the storm like a ghost being, swallowed whole. Wu Zhao slumped into the emperor's arms like a woman whose world had ended, not like one, who had just conquered. Till the emperor held her tightly, mourning the child, blinded to the mother's calculations. His tears fell onto Wu Zhao's hair, but none of hers touched him. She saved her last tears for the secret growing deep inside her. This death, this tragedy, this sacrifice had brought her the throne. For days the palace mourned. Incense curled like pale phantoms. Drums beat slowly, each strike a reminder of a heartbeat stolen. Wu Zhao joined the ritual prayers, Face serene, eyes hollow. Inside, she was counting moves on a board only she could see. The ministers were outraged. How could an empress harm an imperial heir? Punishment must be delivered, swift, merciless. The emperor agreed. Wang's titles were stripped. Her jewels removed, her robes replaced with coarse cloth. She was confined, her phoenix crown shattered into useless fragments. Consort Xiao, the whisperer of poison, shared the same fate. Wu Zhao walked past their cell one night. She paused, listening. Wang's sobs seeped through the bars like water through stone. Please, spare me, please. Wu Zhao closed her eyes. Once she had begged just like this. Now, she did not respond. She simply walked on with steps soft as snowfall and just as cold, because grief, true or performed, had already done its job. She returned to the emperor's side, a widow of the living. He took her hands and promised the unthinkable. None shall stand above you again. Wu Zhao bowed her head, hiding the smile that did not belong on a grieving mother's lips. A promise of throne. A promise formed in tears but forged in blood. The storm had passed, but the echo of that baby's last breath would follow her for the rest of her reign. Years passed like soldiers marching, disciplined, unyielding, and stained with sacrifice. Wu Zhao's daughter remained a silent shadow in the palace archives. No memorial tablet, no ancestral rites, only whispered rumors that fluttered like trapped moths in dark corners. Yet from that silence, power bloomed. With Wang locked away and consort Xiao disgraced, no one remained strong enough to challenge the woman who slept beside the Son of Heaven. Wu Zhao became the emperor's most trusted mind. She wrote edicts under his seal. She chose who lived in luxury and who died in disgrace. Ministers who once mocked her bookshelves now bowed so low their fear made their backs creak like old doors. The emperor, weak of health yet desperate for guidance, leaned into her brilliance like a drowning man clings to driftwood. At first, she stood behind the throne, then beside it, then above. One decree at a time, she stripped away rivals as easily as peeling silk from a flower. The forbidden palace changed its scent. Less jasmine, more iron. Her footsteps were firm like the beat of war drums. She bore sons, heirs, the kind of children empires bow to, and each time she placed a prince into the emperor's arms, victory tasted sweeter, and guilt tasted sharper. She kept that guilt deep, buried beneath gold and protocol, where no one could touch it, not even herself. When Gaozong fell ill, his headaches pounding louder than any minister's voice, Fei Chao took charge. She read state reports aloud while he lay with eyes closed, her voice threading decisions into his weakening pulse. Soon she stopped waiting for his approval. The empire ran through her veins now, and China grew stronger. Roads expanded, taxes reformed, punishments revised. But righteousness does not erase blood. The ministers rebelled, convinced a woman's rule spelled disaster. Yet rebellion only sharpened her resolve. One infamous night, a scroll arrived bearing treasonous signatures. Wu Zhao rolled it up calmly and ordered the names burned into her memory. By dawn, those names were carved into execution logs instead. Justice had become her armor. Fear had become her crown, and the emperor, frightened of losing everything she gave him, sealed the final step. He decreed that Wu Zhao would be Empress of the Tang Dynasty. History gasped. China, a realm where men ruled under heavenly mandate, now kneeled to a woman born of nothing but intelligence and unforgivable will. The coronation ceremony unfolded under a blood-red sunrise. Courtiers bowed lower than ever, yet their eyes peeked upward, watching a miracle they despised. Wu Zhao wore robes of imperial gold, embroidered with dragons coiling like living serpents. Her crown, heavy with pearls, pressed onto her skull like the weight of every life she had stepped over. Incense wafted through the grand hall like the ghosts of past empresses watching. Judging, the emperor sat beside her, but the throne's shadow favored only one. When she accepted the seal of state, The hall shuddered, as though ancestors shifted in their graves. The nobles were forced to chant, "Long live the Empress," but some lips barely moved and others tasted blood from biting back rebellion. Wu Zhao smiled. Power, true power, wasn't given. It was taken. At the banquet celebrating her rise, music of zithers and flutes danced through the air. Servants poured wine into jeweled cups. Laughter clattered like broken gold. Yet beneath the celebration lurked the faintest sound. A baby's distant cry. Wu Zhao froze. The sound faded instantly. Like a dream evaporating at sunrise, she gripped the armrest until her knuckles paled like porcelain. Her pulse hammered. Not now. Not here. Not when the world finally kneels. She blinked the memory away and raised her cup in triumph. Ministers shouted blessings. The Emperor smiled weakly. Drums thundered as if heaven applauded. But heaven did not applaud. Heaven remembered that night. Alone in her chamber, she removed her crown and felt. Her skin finally breathed. Silence returned. Too silent. She sat by the bronze mirror and saw in her reflection, not a ruler blessed by fate, but a woman haunted by a cradle lined with jade. The air thickened with the scent of sandalwood, the same scent that lingered the night her daughter died. She shut her eyes, but the darkness behind them was worse than the world outside. She saw tiny hands. She heard a faint whimper. She felt silk tighten beneath her palms. Wu Zhao bolted upright, breath torn from her lungs. No one was there. Only the crown resting on a silk pillow, gleaming as though mocking her. She whispered, "Every sacrifice was for China." The room stayed silent. Every sacrifice was necessary. Still silence. Wu Zhao clenched her fists. She would not let ghosts steal what she had built. She would not allow regret to weaken the Empress of Heaven. But whispers in the walls murmured a different truth. She had become the most powerful woman in China, and also its most haunted. The palace walls were thick, but guilt seeped through stone like water through cracks. As Wu Zetian's power expanded, her nights shrank into fragments of sleep chased by nightmares. Sometimes she dreamed of the child's cry, a single soft wail that echoed through silent corridors, searching for a mother who had turned away. Other nights, she felt small fingers pulling at her sleeves in the dark. She played the fearless empress by day, issuing decrees with ink black as judgment, exiling ministers with a flick of her wrist, crushing conspiracies before they learned to crawl. But when night returned, and lanterns dimmed to trembling halos of gold, she was no empress, just a woman sitting alone with a crown too heavy to hold joy. She ordered temples built, monks summoned, chants rising like desperate prayers to bargain with heaven. If she fed enough hungry mouths, if she protected her people, if she forged a dynasty of iron, would heaven forgive her? Would her child? Rumors began to swirl. The Empress sacrifices infants for longevity. The Empress is cursed by a dead baby's spirit. The Empress cannot sleep because she hears crying from the walls. Wu Zetian crushed every rumor, but she could not silence her conscience. When Emperor Gaozong died, she took the throne completely, becoming the first and only female emperor in China's long history. She renamed the dynasty Zhou, rewrote heaven's mandate, and commanded even the stars to remember her name. Yet even at the height of glory, death lingered close. Her own sons questioned her authority, whispering rebellion over teacups and silk screens. She silenced them too. Exile, poison, forced suicide. Sons or ministers, disloyalty earned the same fate. Every life she ended added another crack to her crown. Still, the empire prospered. Roads thrived. Art flourished. The poor finally felt seen. Good deeds and sins, woven together like silk threads of white and red. But white never fully hides the red. One winter evening, she wandered into the old nursery, now a dusty chamber hidden from view. She hadn't stepped inside for years. The cradle still stood there. Time had faded the jade's shine, but not the weight of memory. Her fingertips trembled as they traced the railing. Chills seeped into her bones, the same cold she had felt the night. She made herself a throne from a child's breath. A soft sound whispered behind her, like tiny feet running across marble. Wu Zetian turned. Sharply, nothing. The silence pressed against her chest until she could scarcely breathe. Lanterns flickered. Shadows stretched. Then, a baby's cry echoed faintly across the room. Her heart lurched. No, she breathed. It's only memory. Only memory. But memory felt alive. She gripped the cradle so hard her nails scraped jade. Wasn't this what you wanted? She whispered to the emptiness. For you to have a mother who ruled the world. For you to be remembered through me? The walls did not answer. But she felt judged. Her voice cracked. Don't hate me. Everything I did to survive. The cry came again, closer this time. Wu staggered back, hand flying to her chest as if holding her heart in place. The air grew colder. Breath fogged like winter smoke. The lantern flames bent toward the cradle, as though drawn to something unseen. Wu Zetian squeezed her eyes shut. She tried to summon rage, the fire that burned nations, the fury that drowned rivals, but no fury came, only regret. A whisper slipped from her lips, so soft it barely existed. Would you have forgiven me? If I had died instead of you. Silence answered, and silence was the cruelest judge of all. When she opened her eyes, the room was normal again. No sounds, no shadows, only the Empress and the ghost of a choice that could never be undone. She left the nursery, but the nursery never left her. Years later, as illness gnawed her body like moths devouring silk, Wu Zetian felt the weight of eternity approaching. She named her successor and allowed the Tang Dynasty to return. The Zhou dream faded like smoke. On her final nights, she requested no celebrations, no chanting, no court ladies fanning her with feathers, just silence, just darkness, just the faintest hope that one soul might come for her. Her servants claimed that she would sometimes smile. Gazing at a space where no one stood, they whispered that she spoke softly as though comforting a child only she could see. It's all right. Mama's here. Close your eyes. The palace is no longer filled with footsteps or fear. No ministers plotting in moonlit chambers. No cries lost beneath silk. Only the quiet remains. Some say Empress Wu rose by climbing over bones. Others say she saved a crumbling empire by becoming what the world feared most, a woman who refused to kneel. History judges her with ink as black as midnight, but history never felt what she felt. A mother's heart forced to choose between love and survival, under ceilings where even heaven bowed to power. If you listen closely, the past still breathes here. Between the cracks of jade tiles, in the dust gathering on abandoned cradles, she sits alone now, an empress without armies, a mother without children. Her crown is heavy tonight, not with jewels, but with memories. A whisper drifts across her mind, the tiniest laugh she will never hear again. She touches the space beside her, as if someone small might be sleeping there. Someone warm, someone who once belonged to her before destiny demanded too much. And in that final hush before dreams take her, she wonders, if she had been born a man, would her daughter have lived? No one will ever answer, not heaven. Not history, only silence, so breathe with me now slowly. Let the echoes fade, let the cradle rest, let the storm sleep. Tonight, we leave the Dragon Empress in her quiet chamber, under lantern light soft as forgiveness. Even the most feared woman in China was once simply a mother, trying not to lose everything. Good night, and may your dreams be kinder than the world she ruled.